So far in this series, I've fought up close and personal with a centuries-old katana, used some archaic weapons from before time began, and even physically gone back in time to experience 2013 Payday. There's a theme going on here that I'd be foolish not to get on board with, and seeing as the most common comment on my first failed run is, "Why didn't you use a bow?" I thought it was about time to settle the score. Beating Payday 2 without firing a bullet may have been a bridge too far for me, but how about dropping technology altogether and going full medieval on the forces of DC? Wouldn't it be convenient if there was an infamous thief of folklore who wielded a bow and arrow, sought riches for his gang, and fought the status quo for the betterment of society? That's right, today we're going to find out if it's possible to beat Payday 2 as the one and only Robin Hood. Now, if you thought my previous rule sets were unclear based on the titles, this one is going to be a nightmare. The inspiration really was to see if I could make it through with the bow, but I realised that was a little dull on its own, so I reworked the challenge into what it is today. Conceptually, we're only allowed to use medieval era technology to fight off the cops, meaning any more modern inventions in our arsenal will be entirely off limits. So no standard weaponry, no devices like the ECM, and the loss of certain perk decks such as Hacker, Kingpin and Tag Team for the same reason. Other than that, anything goes. Basically, we're going to be RPing as the heisters from Cagliostro's original guide. Before I get into the specific rules of this run though, let me remind you about Apex Gaming PCs, the channel partner. Moving into 2022, you can still order your own custom gaming computer from the guys over at Apex, designed by yours truly and tailored to play Payday 2 at its very best. Check the full range out from the link below. So what exactly makes this run unique? Well, first there will be no use of any primary weapon outside of the Planesrider bow, English longbow, light crossbow, or heavy crossbow, as well as no secondary other than the pistol crossbow. Rule 2 is that no technologically advanced equipment or throwable can be brought on heists either. That means no ECM, no sentries, and no C4, as well as most grenades. The pocket ECM, the Sicario smoke bomb, and the gas dispenser are all also off the table. Most melee weapons are fair game, but I chose to stick with my bare fists or gauge Chivalry pack weapons to keep it on brand. In heists, sometimes computers have to be hacked, but let's assume my medieval heisters are idiot savants when it comes to that, and I will be avoiding hacking cameras to stay in character no matter how debilitating a decision that is. Just as an aside, on my projectile weapons, both poison and explosive tipped arrows are allowed. I know some people will be rolling their eyes at the explosives, but hear me out on this one. Gunpowder tipped arrows and explosives such as the thunderclap bomb have been used in Chinese warfare since the 11th century. The idea of our medieval squad getting their hands on a few is not as ludicrous as it may sound. Also, without explosive shots, I'd have to use melee to deal with dozers, which would have led to pretty much the exact same sociopath setup from the melee only run. So even if you don't like my logic here, at least appreciate that this decision brings a little variety to proceedings. As for the other rules, they are exactly the same as you've come to expect from my previous runs. Yelwonkk is back at level 0 infamy 0, Groundhog Day once again for our protagonist. No grinding is allowed outside of the flow of the storyline, crew AI is not allowed if they take part in relevant combat, and the only mod I'll be using in game is Sydney Hood. I think the difficulty rules have been pretty much spot on, so once again it's Mayhem up to level 80, as suggested as the maximum difficulty according to Overkill, and then Deathwish to finish off the later levels of the run. Lifelines are back by popular demand, with a new one being added to my reserve of get out of jail free cards, in the form of Phone a Friend. Use of this lifeline allows me to call on the assistance of a community member for a single heist. They must however copy my exact build and are subject to the same challenge limitations that I am faced with. Thank you very much for giving me phenomenal feedback for the system on the previous challenge run. Drop difficulty and crew support also make a return, allowing me to lower the difficulty by 1 level on a single heist, or bring along Team AI to assist with a loud heist. Remember, the goal of this challenge is to complete the entire career mode from start to finish. However, for the theme, I've decided to add some side quests to this one, those being the 3 obtainable Chivalry Pack Mask achievements. That means we'll have to keep those challenges in mind as we build to help us dress up for the part. All that said, let's get to stealing from the rich and giving to ourselves. As I mentioned, Yelwonkk is still trapped in purgatory, yet to have actually seen the career complete message and having missed out on that trip to the past last time around. Even so, he's more than ready to evolve into the best heisting archer Payday has ever seen. Sorry mate. I start by throwing away the random continental coins the game keeps giving me after I reset, switch characters over to John Wick, who I've decided to make a great oldie time warrior, and head into my first heist. I'm using Car Shop once again, as it's the perfect launchpad for this run as a very stealthable heist even without our challenge specific weaponry. It'll also get us to that level 10 mark to avoid having to complete the tutorial. Making things a little harder, we don't yet have our usual primitive weapons and instead are equipped with these gun things, which John has no idea how to use. Ignore that footage. Instead, we're forced to intimidate guards or beat them down the old-fashioned way with our bare fists. Despite a civ calling the cops whilst planting the C4, we're fast enough to jump into a car and speed away with time to spare. Somehow, Yelwonkk drives out like a pro despite never seeing a car in his life, canonically. This brings us straight to level 23 and sets us up for the rest of the run. We're now able to purchase the Plains Rider bow, which is going to be our go-to weapon for the entire challenge. We also put a few points into Yakuza, as once again we only need 3 perks to have our stealth deck ready to go. Speaking of stealth, that's how most of the initial heists will go down, so we finish the prep with a few standard stealth pickups, remembering ECMs are off the table, and complete getting ready. Up next, it's Let's Make Some Money, a 2-parter, with the bank heist being up first, although here is where I make my first mistake. I see a bank heist gold appear in CrimeNet and go in for it, assuming it will progress the story. However, after sneaking my way through with a few deft shots from the Plains Rider and going out of my way to secure all loot, I find that for some strange reason we needed to do a bank heist cache to progress. This means that I've slightly overleveled in the early game, so I make a pilgrimage into the safe house to mourn Tony's empty room once again and meditate on my next steps. Considering the sheer mountain of experience that lies ahead of me, I've come to the conclusion that the 150,000 I'd earned here is negligible enough to be ignored, and hop back into the right heist this time. Lessons learned, definitely Yelwonkk's medieval illiteracy. I smash my way through the standard cash bank heist in much the same fashion as the first, before putting those extra skill points I'd earned into action, purchasing and equipping my first and only secondary option, the pistol crossbow. This thing looks fairly high tech, but works via a pretty simple mechanism at its core, so I put one together with a more suitable paint job and max out its concealment. Next stop, jewelry store. After dealing with the guards at the rear of the building, I've learned from my previous challenge run exploits that to get things done, sometimes you need to spill a little blood, so after using some pretty medieval methods to bury some civs, I make my escape without the added worry of them calling the cops. With that, I now have the perk points for Heavy Irezumi, and that increased stealth movement speed that I'm after. Also, if you've been observant so far, you may have noticed that I'm not having to mess around in CrimeNet and wait for heists to appear at the correct difficulty anymore. That's because Overkill changed the career mode menu so that you can dictate the difficulty of the next story heist and purchase it entirely free of charge. This is a massive improvement which makes running these challenges that bit more enjoyable. It's Diamond Store up next though, which is notorious for its strange RNG door. On run 1, the door into the security office simply doesn't exist on the outside of the building, which is pretty much always an instant reset from me. Attempt 2 was not quite so unfortunate, chopping down the security and setting up to clear the shop floor from guards. Sadly, medieval Yelwonkk has a slight issue with the manager refusing to be intimidated on time, resulting in a pretty awkward detection. But if you thought that one was bad, the third time around really takes the cake. After dominating the final guard on the map, for some reason Yelwonkk decides to try to move his body, which means shooting him. In a final act of defiance, the guy ragdolls straight into the line of sight of a camera placed outside, setting off the alarm in the worst way possible. Fortunately, after that series of mistakes, Yelwonkk is able to get his act together for run 4, again doing some serious damage to the local civilian population after dealing with the manager and her security, as money is never going to be an issue when there are like 5 weapons total that I can make use of. With that mess out of the way, the dreaded Go Bank is up next, a heist I've repeatedly tried to tackle in loud due to my hate of running it in stealth. This time though, I have a plan. Due to my lack of offensive tools, this run is going to be all about defense, so I'm planning to run the strongest defensive deck in the game, Stoic. Even better, simply picking up 2 points in the Stoic deck is enough to massively buff myself up for the mayhem early game, and might be enough resistance to deal with those terrible snipers who've constantly walled me off from completing this heist in loud. With Wick now an alcoholic, and explosive rounds equipped on my crossbow to deal with shields and dozers, I put together a very rudimentary build. Up as Ace as a safety net, a Joker Cop as a much needed distraction, Iron Man for tankiness, and I'm ready to go. Remember, with Stoic 2 of 9, we keep our armor but don't have the massive health pool, so we need to play a bit more around cover and the hip flask. Fortunately, the bow is powerful enough to one-shot most enemy types with a headshot, which is pivotal without any taser resistance skills on deck just yet. The sheer tankiness of this build is apparent from the off, taking on green dozers at melee range and effectively sponging most of the sniper's damage while setting up the cage on the roof. Sadly, run 1 was ended by this cheeky cop ducking an arrow before having the balls to flat out cuff the crazed bow-wielding John Wick. Honestly, this is one of the first times I've seen this crazy interaction on a heist like this, and without any AI to rescue us, it's always an instant failure. Spurred on by the sheer cheek of that elite SWAT, Yelwonkk headed back in with a grudge to settle. Evidently, with Stoic, go bank is doable. This time around, the highlight of the heist was learning some serious geometry, as it became evident that leaving the snipers alive was not really an option when building the loot cage in the parking lot. Some of these shots were pretty crazy, and came as really good practice for working out the bow's trajectory. Honestly, the Plains Rider is still a pretty sick weapon in the right hands. The pistol crossbow on the other hand is not great, but will give me a decent utility option later into the run with its different ammo types. With the snipers no longer out of reach, I'm able to hold the cage down, probably a little too aggressively, especially after the plane misses on the first run. In a mad scramble, when it came around for pass 2, my only loot bag was stolen from the cage at the final moment, meaning I'd need to do the heavy lifting myself. But one final sprint got me to the underground, and from that point, escape is inevitable. This is definitely the strongest I've felt at this stage in a challenge run, dinging level 48 and ready for more loud heists, with just a hip flask and my assortment of feathered twigs. Oh, and a morning star apparently. In fact, to complete the look, I headed straight into an armoured transport heist at the park. The goal wasn't to complete it, but instead to find a cloaker and spear him with my freshly unlocked javelin, completing the skewer achievement and unlocking the first gauge Chivalry pack mask, the Mason Knight Veteran. With a camouflaged heavy ballistic vest, we were finally starting to look the part, but before Yelwonkk had the chance to use it, we'd first have to stealth our way through the dreaded train heist. This was, and always is, a tumultuous pain in the backside. Attempt 1 was failed when I carelessly ran into a guard with no remaining pages. Run 2 was much the same, failed when I ran out of body bags to hide the mess I was making in the lumberyard. Run 3 was over in seconds, and so my terrible luck with this heist continued. Failure after failure as my patience grows thinner, and I take more and more risks. The fact that ECMs aren't available definitely doesn't help matters, as it's often during the drilling of the carriages that I alert the guards. The worst thing was, train heist is simply time consuming, and there's very little you can do to speed things up. When I got awkwardly caught during the ammo moving sequence, I was at breaking point. I proceeded to then fail the heist about 8 times in as many minutes. But once I finally got my head together, took a break and stopped acting like more of a deprived than a noble knight, I was able to cleanly start moving the ammunition bags with a pager to spare. I moved them all in one go via the zip line to the river and escaped in just over 20 minutes, which is actually up there with my best times for this heist. So, hey, silver linings and all that. Honestly, train heist has to be my least favourite in the game at this point. But with that now past, we can finally look forward to a bit more medieval warfare on the 2 additional transport hits I need to complete. First up, I went with Overpass, which is one of the easier options due to the flank routes and lack of snipers. I now have shockproof, making tasers less of a supreme threat, but I'm still lacking the bow crit damage I was planning to build for. Even so, Stoic makes us impossibly tanky, especially whilst opening the lockboxes, resulting in this heist being just a matter of resilience. I even brought a Claymore along to go after another Steel Helmet achievement, and made it through first time. Transport Harbour was very much the same story. I found myself slightly more reliant on first aid kits, but still breezed on through in just under 15 minutes. With the first wave of Bane's jobs conquered, it's Vlad up next, with 4 stores presenting more of a waiting game once you actually get a decent safe spawn location, and being one of the shortest heists in the run. Moorcrasher is also theoretically simple, although a couple of bows don't come top of the list of property destruction options. I rely heavily on the gasoline canisters and explosive bolts to ramp up the damage in the first place, although for one of the first times in the series, I did actually manage to legitimately fail an attempt on Moorcrasher. I idiotically trapped myself in the ground floor stairwell and was physically unable to push past multiple tasers and a dozer before a shield came along and physically put up a blockade. I looked pretty silly scrambling for first aid in my self-made prison in hindsight. On the second run though, it's easy enough to hold down the show car as I usually do and escape without such a dogfight. Up next, White Christmas is an easy enough clear, there's no troublesome objectives here, and it makes a great heist to practice those long shots on, so my archery skills are definitely on the up at this point. Ukrainian Job is yet another of Vlad's waiting simulator heists disguised as stealth, which I duly breezed through in under 5 minutes. Which brings us onto the ever tricky Meltdown. The awkward objectives, inconsistent cover, and terrifying sniper positions on this heist make it one to fear as a man stuck in the 1500s. But thanks to the mighty power of Duke's magic Stoic juice, I was feeling braver than usual for loud heists. That bravery seemed entirely misjudged on run 1 after a combination of those snipers and my bad positioning led to my untimely demise next to the Longfellow. However, in a shocking turn of events, run 2 actually went really smoothly. Slowly, for sure, it took over 5 minutes before I jammed a crowbar into the ventilation system, but the location of the warheads was in my favour. The big adaptation that I've made after dozens of failures on this heist within prior runs is to move all 8 nukes to the Longfellow before delivering the first set. That way you can keep combat in specific zones and don't have to make as many long distance death runs in front of these snipers. Of course, the crazy defensive armoured Stoic was doing a job for me as well. Naturally, I forget that 4 nukes can be loaded into the car, meaning I force myself into 3 separate heart-stopping runs through the docks instead of just 2. But my patented jump out the car, drink and drive strat seemed to get the job done, hauling the last 2 warheads to the train and escaping after 25 minutes in heist. I'll take all the second try meltdowns I can get based on prior experience with this one. Taking a quick look at the build, I have no plan to add more points to Stoic until I can maximise the entire deck, and the addition of low blow has certainly upped my damage output when landing body shots or taking on dozers. Aftershock is up next, which tends to be a time-consuming battle, but not an overly dangerous one on Mayhem difficulty. In fact, I had so much spare time, I was even able to challenge a Black Dozer to mortal combat with my greatsword and take him down to unlock the Black Knight achievement. As for the rest of Aftershock, instead of doing my death sentence strats and moving the weapon safes to the truck, I actually chose to drive the truck to the safes to save time, loading up and moving to the escape zone. This was an easy holdout with the extra survivability of Stoic, as I'm able to play quite aggressively instead of cowering in the corner as usual and escape without issue. Stealing Christmas is up next on Vlad's bingo card, and somehow I managed to die in the first 2 minutes of this heist simply due to stubbornness when opening a door. Very nice, Taser. Thank you. Attempt 2 is fortunately a lot more successful, breezing through, hitting some nice shots and escaping with Harudin easily enough. This is really the first run where every failure has felt avoidable, which, at least for my sanity, is pretty great. There's nothing more frustrating than finding yourself at the mercy of RNG. Speaking of those self-made failures, on the next heist nightclub, I was determined to go stealthily, leading to 4 quick-fire mistakes alerting the cops, as hard as I tried to beat this gangster down with a shield. Another delayed cock-up later, it was clear that Nightclub is only such an easy snooze fest usually due to the power of ECM overdrive, which wasn't allowed here due to the technological requirement confusing Yelwonkk's primitive mind. In any case, 1 try later, I successfully drilled into the office, emptied the safe, and fled the scene. Vlad out the way, it's time for Hector's multi-day stitch-ups. Now, I'm well aware of how long this video is already, so for the sake of brevity, I'm going to pick up the pace when little of consequence goes down. Day 1 here is a breeze as I grab the minimum of 4 bags and escape in the armoured car, and day 2 is just as easy, securing those bags and bolting once escape becomes available. Hector's jobs really are what you make of them, so if speed is your goal, not loot value, they pose a pretty surmountable challenge. Firestarter is next, and whilst day 1 is pretty slow when drilling the vans for weapons, it's easy enough to destroy most of the assault rifles and escape without too many issues. Day 2 is another I insisted on stealthing for some reason. Again, it's much easier with ECM, so I find myself diving straight into several sloppy failures on what is a fairly overpopulated map in my opinion. But in the end, I surprised myself, sneaking through on attempt 5 with only 1 kill, and, amusingly enough, my Lao build equipped, so clearly this was just a god run for RNG. The final day of Firestarter is the 3rd bank heist of this run, which I decided to do loud, not because it's any easier, just because I felt like fighting instead of staring at a drill again. A clean, simple completion. Finally for Hector, it's rats, the least subtle clue Overkill has ever given us to anything. Day 1, being a simple holdout, is incredibly easy with single player spawns, and never really threatened the medieval build. Day 2 is usually a cakewalk, but I decided to play through the Betrayal variant when RNG stung me. It's still not hard by any means, but the map layout certainly has a few tricks up its sleeve, which makes me think it's a shame that we seldom see gunfights on this heist. The escape that popped up afterwards was another inconvenience, I suppose, and then on day 3 I sped through to get this heist done in just over a minute. We've now hit level 68 and the Elephant's heists are the next hurdles for us to take on. Big Oil tends to be where things start to ramp up before the big difficulty jump to Death Wish, so in classic Yelwonkk fashion there are a couple of messy failures stealthing day 1, not an ideal start to the heist. ECMs normally trivialise this, but aren't an option here for our technologically backward heister. However, with the right room layout and decent bow accuracy, it's very possible to subdue the entire building without raising the alarm, and then wait out the drills to secure the address. Day 2 is also worth stealthing for as long as possible for us, but once again, without ECMs, if I don't get lucky on the location of the server room, the risk of drilling through the doors makes this another tough one, with multiple resets and another stupid kill in front of a camera setting me back. Once I found the server through the first door though, my odds of succeeding increased dramatically, stacking a few bodies in the home cinema, doing some serious science, and then hauling Engine 8 to the poolside pickup. At this point though, I remembered my fatal mistake. Bringing AI onto Big Oil is not allowed within the rules, as they will engage in combat once Pilot Bile sets off the alarm. This makes the escape notably easier, even though I tried to hide Dallas, James and Duke out of the way. Whilst their influence was limited, I'm unfortunately forced to use up my crew support lifeline here, or else fail the entire run. Remember, this lifeline was pivotal in getting through Slaughterhouse on the Amcar run, so it could be an early death for this one, we just don't know it yet. In any case, that's a worry for at least 10 hours of gameplay later. For now, we push on with Framing Frame. Day 1 is a breeze. I actually escaped with almost all of the paintings and a page to spare. As I successfully stealthed it, Day 2 is also a walk in the park as the odds of ambush are only 1%, meaning we move on to Day 3, my classic nemesis since 2013. And of course, it wouldn't be a Kknowley challenge run without a detection due to running into a wall, ruining attempt number 1. However, to my absolute surprise, attempt 2 went off without a hitch, massively aided by the extra paintings I'd stolen at the gallery. At one point I even considered going back for the gold, but decided not to push my luck, escaping in just under 10 minutes. Election Day is next, another heist that's always easy enough. By now you guys know I have no patience and just used my truck tagging guesswork for Day 1, which actually resulted in 2 unlucky failures this time around. Just so you're aware, if I went to the alternate Day 2, I would fail the run due to the AI I'm bringing with me. On the third reset, I tried to slow things down and actually got myself caught for the first time on this heist in years before reverting back to guesswork and brute forcing my way to Day 2, which starts off much like Day 1, somehow getting cuffed in stealth through a brick wall and closed window. Not even Houdini's escaping this magic guard. At the second time of asking, I was able to avoid the guard's voodoo and stealth my way through, albeit a lot slower than usual, owing to the lack of ECMs. With the elephant out of the way for now, it's time to take stock before the dentist heist. My strange tank crit build is coming along nicely. I now have shock and ace, making shields a lot easier to deal with via melee, so I've switched over to poison bolts on my pistol crossbow, more as a test than anything else. Big Bank is always comfortable for me, so ideal to try out new build concepts on, the hope being that crit poison could destroy dozers without me having to take off their faceplates. This had mixed results. I started this heist by taking over 7 minutes to find the correct computer, which gave me plenty of time to do hand-to-hand combat with shields. Remember, I'm still going for all the Chivalry mass and need the achievement their armor is thick and their shields broad, which I achieved pretty violently about halfway through the heist. Overall, my new strategy of turning bulldozers into pincushions was not an outright failure, but definitely one that goes into the nice ideas category. After a seriously lengthy heist on the bank, not aided by a massive scramble from inside the thermite vault, I was successfully able to escape via the elevator shaft with the bare minimum of 4 bags. With that, the mass side quest is complete, as Heisters of the Round Table is impossible to take on within this rule set. So, to spare us onto the Holy Grail, I equipped the crew with their own medieval fashion symbols. Up next, it's Hotline Miami, and for some strange reason, I also decided it was time to rock the boat and try out the light crossbow. I suppose better now than on Death Wish, but even so, I was rapidly punished for carrying this hunk of junk by the Russian mafia. Still, I persist with it on to the next run. I suppose the idea is that it may be a superior option against the many snipers on day 1 of this heist. Honestly, this is just a lesson in how powerful Armored Stoic is on Mayhem though. You hardly need a weapon when you're virtually unkillable, although I do have to admit, despite its painfully slow reload speed, the satisfaction of headshots with the crossbow almost make it feel bearable. Day 1 was a hard-fought slog, but not one which presented too many issues. You may also be wondering at this point, why doesn't this guy have surefire and body expertise aced? Surely it would be helping with all those missed headshots. And you'll be happy to find out, I'm wondering exactly the same thing. If I was some sort of headshot machine, maybe I'd argue otherwise, but challenging myself to only hit headshots with these awkward projectile-based weapons was unnecessarily tough. After escaping Day 1's motel, Day 2's apartment block is up next. Strangely, it's here where my faith in the light crossbow came good. In this close quarter setting, it's actually quite easy for me to consistently land deadly headshots, even when firing it from the hip. Normally, Hotline Miami gives me a fair few issues, but this time around, after going all William Tell on the Commissar's guitar ass, I cleared the problem heist without a hitch. At this point, I'm in an experimental mood. I put together a build with Berserker and Frenzy for Hotston Breakout, with the plan being to lean into the swordsmanship of a medieval heister. I also equipped the god-awful heavy crossbow, because I decided I wanted to suffer through multiple seconds worth of reload time. With the pistol crossbow as my acting primary, this strange setup was actually okay. Until for about the third time on this run, I was cuffed whilst attempting a lengthy interaction. Honestly, this mechanic sucks for solo players, and actually kind of perplexes me in its existence. Anyway, after putting my dummy back in, I went again, this time using a Joker to defend my personal space and escape to the FBI office for day 2. This is always an easy heist given its close quarter nature, especially if you defend the power box diligently, so I have absolutely no issue escaping with the main server in tow. Next is Hotston Revenge. This is still a sloppy heist for me, but one I'm improving at steadily. One slip up on the stairs and a dead Hector later, it was easy enough for me to slip out with the 6 bags of Payday gang evidence, despite some misguided parkour by Bodhi. The diamond is next, with me again varying things with the equally cumbersome English longbow, which somehow feels even more sluggish than the crossbow, even with explosive tipped arrows. Describing this heist as frustrating would be an understatement, as the longbow struggles to keep up with the flow of cops who can successfully hold me off the objective. This results in one of the slowest and bloodiest heists of the run, even finding myself trapped in the diamond exhibit at one point. Over 30 minutes and almost 300 bodies later, I finally escape with the diamond. As you can see, Bodhi's now really looking the part. Moving forward, there's always a lull in the run around this time as stealth briefly becomes the modus operandum. Golden Grin always features a comedy of errors from me, especially without the ability to time loop cameras around the security area. Self-immolation was the least of my worries across over 10 quick-fire failures, with Gravity even taking a customary scalp. Eventually, I slowed things down enough to clear the heist in under 13 minutes, and with only 1 pager used up, which shows how fickle Golden Grin can be with its RNG. At this point in the challenge, I pretty much always run a bomb dockyard as it's categorically the easier heist. But after being disgusted by my own recent stealth performances, I decided to take a trip to the slopes of Bomb Forest this time. We get the nighttime variant, which is a decently rare find and nice reward, adding a little atmosphere to the medieval beatdown. By now, I was definitely working loosely with the Robin Hood definition, again ignoring his signature bow for the light crossbow's sniper killing prowess. I would have hated every second of this with the Anarchist build from last time around, but honestly, Stoic hardly gives a damn about Mayhem snipers, letting me run freely, or at least as freely as you can, when one wrong jump equals death by steep cliff. With a liberal use of my first aid kits, I'm able to carry the bomb parts out of the train and into the helicopter, clearing the dreaded forest heist, which I've intentionally avoided like the plague in the past. With the experience it rewards, we finally hit level 80, thus beginning the suffering portion of the challenge run. Scarface Mansion is the next port of call, now on Death Wish, and for whatever reason, I am obsessed with clearing every living cartel member outside of the mansion. This gets a lot harder when you're limiting yourself to a single fire projectile weapon, and even when done right, you can still easily be caught by guards on the roof. Most of my unsuccessful runs were so brief they hardly deserve a mention, but the worst of the worst came when Ernesto himself decided to become intangible, dodging an arrow aimed at his heart and drawing his pistol before actually spotting me. I was so panicked by this situation, I missed the crucial shot, and he managed to alert every guard on the complex with his dying breath. I wouldn't have even minded if this only happened once, but on a later attempt, the exact same thing occurred, one missed shot on my end, and then a dying shot from him to alert the world to my presence. Scarface Mansion remained an absolute thorn in my side, but after enough repetition, I made it to my chance with Ernesto once again. This time, after panicking with throwing knives, I was able to land the fatal arrow on the still unaware crime lord, fleeing the scene and escaping after nearly a record 21 restarts. With Scarface finally out of the way, the 20 levels of Crime Spree always seemed like a nice reprieve. I initially chose Green Bridge, and to my shock, found myself heading into custody courtesy of my truly idiotic gameplay. Fortunately, it was at Spree level 0, so I was able to hop back in, play with a tiny modicum of respect for the actual 44 caliber weaponry I was facing, and coast through with my daft crossbow build. Up next, to make 20 points in 2 heists, I hit the go bank once again. With my original bow equipped and a massively improved build over when I took on this heist initially, it's a simple clear and crime spree completion. Onwards now to Counterfeit, the first serious Death Wish challenge on this run, with the noble Scottish knight, Big Bonnie. It's here where Armoured Stoic really starts to fall apart, as I comfortably clatter my way through the initial objectives of the heist, only to be hit by an immovable wall during the escape. The ridiculous DPS combo of both a green and skull dozer finished me off in an instant. Getting as far through this heist as possible in stealth is a massive boon, so run 2 was promptly aborted when I accidentally fired this civ into 2023. Run 3 was given the full sniper plus melee treatment as I lost Die Hard and went down soon after. Finally, I got it together on run 4, doing half the heist in pseudo-stealth before plowing my way through the pressure drilling section with some half-decent sniper hits, and then rushing past the spawning dozers thanks to some slightly superior RNG. That experience of Robin Hood taking on Death Wish left me a little uneasy, so when the opportunity to stealth First World Bank came up, I was all over it. Run 1 ended with one of the most unnecessary failures I've produced in this series, simply lacking the patience to wait for the insider to move the guards aside. But I have a much better performance on run 2, clearing the vault side of the bank, grabbing all loot for good measure, and escaping with a half-decent time. It's much the same story for Murky Station, the less upsetting train-based heist, a couple of classic drone cam failures before a pacifist 4-minute completion, which I was pretty happy with. This final bit of XP is hugely important to us. At long last, we have enough perk points to maximise Stoic in one go and become a true slave to the medieval meta. I add in Hostage Taker, Iron Man and Feigned Death to the build to become a serious force of unkillable nature, a fully armoured, Scottish, alcoholic knight. I think the Robin Hood comparison may be a little bit off base at this point. But this upgrade in our tankiness came at just the right time. Boiling Point has almost been a run killer in the past, so having the extra resistance is huge on this tricky Deathwish heist. And immediately, it's evident how much tougher I actually am, face-tanking Russian dozers like they're nothing. Honestly, Stoic may be a little too much, even with the current restrictions we're running. Once inside the compound, it got a little more hectic, especially with my limited options against groups, but as I avoided the turret spawn, I'm able to grab the master server without too many issues. The snipers are always a tricky proposition, especially when a taser manages to hold you in their firing line for multiple seconds, but the sheer ludicrousness of Stoic and uppers is really on display for you here. No pride in the sloppy gameplay, Yelwonkk's getting carried by his alcoholism. Oh, and apparently, this was the first time Yelwonkk's made it through Boiling Point without needing to be revived by Feigned Death, so hey, that's kind of embarrassing. Moving on, Christmas may be over in reality, but we still need to conquer one more of Vlad's seasonal heists, Santa's Workshop. The biker elves spawned in fairly favourable locations, and after some decent solo bag juggling, it's time to escape straight away. Car shop's next, for the second time on this run. Arrows seem to have decent launch trajectories, which helps in this pager scramble, after which my only remaining enemy on this heist is the treacle-like driving physics. Fortunately, I come out the victor once again. The biker heist presents the next hurdle on our journey to conquering the White House with 1500s technology. The turret on day 1 has been a consistent problem across all runs, and sadly, even for Stoic, this was no different. Indoor objectives are more manageable, although the Chrome Skull Room gets completely overran for a time, given our single target limitations. Defending the mechanic is still incredibly intense, but not the challenge of massive proportions it has been in the past. Being as tough to take down as I was, this felt more like a shooting gallery. That's until the final stage of the heist, when a squad of tasers break through my shotproof skill and actually drain the entire Stoic health pool. Oh well, run 2 had much kinder RNG, meaning I could hold down the area out of sight of the turret and boost the bike with limited resistance. Nothing to worry about now, I just have to drive straight down the tunnel and... oh, I appear to be stuck. Yep, the nightmarishly frustrating Austin Powers geometry bug on the biker heist. If you crash in the tunnel, it's basically impossible to get a lock on the wheel that you'd actually need to turn around, so you're forced to shimmy. I even run off at one point to see if you can leave without the bike. Apparently not. After a few minutes, the SWAT start catching up with me, but fortunately they were equally confused by the situation, choosing to run directly into the side of the bike and die, purely out of sympathy as far as I could tell. After 5 minutes of being lodged there sideways, I finally shimmied Rust's apparent pride and joy back out of the tunnel and slowly drive my way through, the usual way this time. This was arse-clenchingly frustrating for anyone wondering. Day 2 is a reprieve from my tunnel experience, running the gauntlet as quickly as my armour would allow, giving the biker boss the full force of my Zweihander, and escaping with the BCI helmet without much of an issue. Such is the power of Stoic. Under the massive hurdles surmounted, we're on the home straight now. It's time to take further revenge against Panic Room. Bows and arrows may not be the best suited at taking out snipers, but when you try to get the job done with playing cards and snowballs, it really puts it into perspective. I enjoy taking out the sniper squad with a series of well-placed arrows, realise how difficult this challenge would be without the aid of jokers for a period, and blow the building into oblivion for all the pain it's caused in the past. Securing the roof simply means holding off the assault wave, so after almost 400 kills towards Yelwonkk's revenge campaign, we're finally able to secure the panic room and flee the scene through the sewers. Following that triumph, it's time for Brooklyn 1010, another heist which rewards high accuracy over range and doesn't seem well suited to my current build. I use the explosive arrows of my pistol crossbow to keep the courtyards clear and hold as best I can, although the warning signs of this heist difficulty were evident after my first need for feigned death to proc. The second area on this heist presents an even tougher holdout, resulting in me using up most of my first aid reserves here. Once finally back at street level, it's a painstaking wait for Sharon, as I like to call him, to catch up, only to find myself going down without feigned death proccing this time as my arrow reserves start to run dry. I was too close to be disheartened though, following up with a second, far cleaner run, carrying 9 FAKs to the escape and making sure that my quiver was well stocked. Twitch even did me a favour by ramming through the cop cars, giving me the marginally safer escape variant. Stealth again now with the yacht heist. My first few attempts were pretty ugly, alerting the entire boat in under 30 seconds repeatedly, but a much more measured approach found some success. This is not a clean nor fast completion, but once I finally find the last money bundles on the upper floor, I'm patient enough to activate the override switches silently and make out like a bandit. Stealth has been absolutely awful on this run. I didn't realise how much I'd miss my trusty technology. Undercover follows the Continental Jobs, another classic heist, which usually means a slightly tougher one. The rooftop limo spawn is never ideal, but we make the RNG work by tanking like a madman with Die Hard. I hate escort sections on heists, but the taxman is at least respectful enough to get off the roof before he stops cooperating with me. In any case, I use a massive two-handed greatsword to extract the information from the guy. Now, apparently this thing is very blunt if it can be used as a whacking stick, although Bloodthirst has certainly helped us out when it comes to dozers. Undercover is always hectic, although I find the basement relocation makes life a little easier when extracting the passwords. We complete the hack in just over 15 minutes before making a clean and fairly easy run to the rooftop escape zone. Which brings us on to Slaughterhouse, a very tough heist to take on alone, yet I felt shockingly ready, although that might be the drink talking. I have a slightly different plan when it comes to securing the gold, which had been the hardest part of the heist previously. Instead of going one bag at a time, I'd drag a set of 4 there before starting to drop them in the container. Then I'd go fetch the remaining 4 in sets of 2, meaning I'd hopefully only have to deal with 2 sets of snipers at most whilst carrying loot. Equally, moving a small group of bags across shorter distances meant that the constant waves of cops trying to move my bags in the opposite direction wouldn't be such an issue. The conveyors were, as ever, a godsend, as the bags seemed to be ignored when on them, so I take things gradually, pick off the snipers with my own marksman weaponry, and hide the gold across a 10-minute tug of war with the AI. I was really fortunate not to encounter the SWAT van turret spawn on this particular run, I have to admit. At this point, it's just a scramble to stay alive, as it feels like the entire courtyard consists of spawn points, and I want to save first aid kits for the escape. This is a holdout I'm actually successful in this time, with Stoic undoubtedly outperforming Anarchist, and a fairly easy set of spawns blocking my escape to end this difficult heist, even without the use of a lifeline. That means level 90 has been achieved, and what I hope to be the back broken on this challenge, but the several pages of script yet to come should tell you otherwise. Locke enters the picture at this point in the career mode, meaning we first have to meet the guy in person during Beneath the Mountain. I think this is such a sick way to introduce the character. He is to more modelling of the guys who dictate the entire game to us in Heist. Fortunately, despite being a heist that takes place across multiple combat ranges, it's not one with any notably tough sequences. Forcing my way into the bunker is a slower process than usual, but once in, I don't encounter the usual turret troubles I'm used to having. Heading deeper past the airlock, it's more of the same. I long-shot a dozer, open the Hades and Zeus vaults, and make it to lock easily enough. Blowing up the comms equipment may be a little harder in the open air, but I have enough first aid to push through and load up the helicopter before safely taking off and fleeing the scene of the crime. However, Locke's second heist has proven to be much trickier in the past. Birth of Sky has some incredibly easy sections as well as some nightmarish ones. For example, the aeroplane and skydive itself, simple. Escaping through the sewers, problematic. It's also got a fair bit of RNG to it depending on where the money pallets land, some being well covered whilst others are sniper honeypots. Run 1 went smoothly, pallet 1 and 2 were in the sky in just over 5 minutes, with 3 going a few later once I'd rebuilt the thing. I even had the time to potshot some snipers from over 50 meters, which was incredibly satisfying. However, on the way through the sewers, the nightmare begins. The endless funneling of cops into the tunnel with me is simply too much to deal with one by one. I find myself entirely trapped and unable to even make a sprint past this taser. This is pretty much the blueprint for all future runs. No issues getting to the escape, plenty of problems once I got there. Without any jokers, all the focus is immediately on me, which was crushing even with Stoic. The speed and aggression of Skulldozers make it impossible to move systematically, so I find myself going down again and again. The one time I made it all the way through to the boat, the burn time on the thermite was simply too lengthy for me to make it through, meaning rushing, whilst my only option, was still fairly limited. Even when able to set up with jokers, we were consistently so badly outnumbered, the slight distraction hardly mattered or lasted. I was able to retreat up the ladder, but that simply gives the cops time to regroup or kill my jokers. I tried adding Messiah to my build to confirm a revive, but even that wasn't enough. I knew I was starting to crack around about when I got cuffed on the bloody plane, probably the first heister to ever manage this great feat. Once back underground, I attempted to cheese a group of cops from the ladder shaft, but they were constantly respawning thanks to the endless assault. This kind of stagnant approach was never going to work, as a group of cops become too built up to even push past. For one final roll of the dice, I switched up to an explosive bow, hoping it would help me stun and clear the path out of the sewers. Yet it still wasn't enough, nothing could get me through, and my desire to continue bashing my head against frustrating RNG was dwindling rapidly. At last, just as we'd done before, it was time to use lifeline number 2, drop difficulty. I'm incredibly frustrated to have to do this. Mayhem is sort of a joke once we get there, but that one tiny section on Death Wish is close to being a run ender for many rule sets, simply if they lack the requisite damage to kill multiple bulldozers. This sucks, but as you can tell with the reduced damage output of Mayhem, it's easy for us just to rush forward, tanking dozers with first aid kits. In Bonnie's frustration at the situation though, she did manage to pull off Robin Hood's secret technique of turning a two-handed greatsword into an arrow for her bow. This has to be one of the highest tier uses of everyone's favourite melee glitch I always see on the Reddit. Anyhow, we eventually make it through without the entire army at our heels, allowing me to sail off and escape from this hellhole. Back onto the classics, Heat Street is next with only one lifeline left if I find myself in trouble. Heat Street wasn't going to be the one presenting that though, this one went off without a hitch, with nothing to write home about except for another nice sniper takedown. Greenbridge is after that, a heist I've beaten already, but that doesn't stop me from getting absolutely manhandled by a couple of magnum wielding cops. Run 2 though was another repeat of Heat Street. Found the prisoner quite quickly, had the usual nightmare getting him to path upstairs, and then held off at the scaffolding by hiding from the chopper like a coward, or I suppose someone wielding 1,000-year-old weaponry. If anything, this was marginally easier than the crime spree run, which moves us onto the home straight, Law City, and the fight against the Kataru. Locke's betrayal is up first in Alaskan Deal, which is a fun one despite the unfortunate subtext. This is the perfect solo heist with objectives well spread out, so there goes another first timer. Diamond Heist gives me the opportunity to embarrass myself during stealth again, so I oblige with a quick Molotov. I have no idea why I'm so sloppy on this heist. I'm often in a good position to clear it, and then I do something stupid like throw my loot in front of a guard. A few uninspiring runs later, I was back into the vault and able to start hauling the diamonds one by one. I even got lucky enough to find the red diamond, one of the many low odds events that have taken place during this run. I then escape without a single pager usage, which again highlights the inconsistency of my stealthing abilities. We're deep into this run now, and as I head through Reservoir Dogs, I just want to thank everyone for watching these challenge runs. If you do have any ideas for future runs, let me know in the comments, although know that I'm already looking at doing explosive, multi-weapon and pacifist runs at the moment. I also want to ask how you feel about the length of these videos. Payday's career mode is long, there's a lot of heists in a run. As a result, it's always days if not weeks worth of recording, then just as long scripting and editing, which makes it tough to put out as many different videos as I'd like to. Basically, I'm wondering if you like this format or would like to see more cutouts of runs, or even have a shorter format with me, such as with the mini Halloween challenge. I'm happy to do what you enjoy watching the most. That said, back to Reservoir Dogs, because whilst Day 2 chronologically went without issue, Day 1 can be troublesome. The ambush in particular is a nightmare until you can get a Joker on board. Even then, Skulldozers are an issue if you can't take them out quickly. For my second attempt, I got in the zone during the security hack and found the other objectives far easier than usual thanks to Stoic countering snipers. This time I decided to move the diamonds a couple at a time and use the power of Stoic to push during assault waves. This was a difficult but certainly fair and satisfying completion in the end, but apparently we've lost a Bane and gained a lock, so Lucky Boy sends us to Brooklyn. Here's how the build is holding up at level 95. Brooklyn Bank is not a difficult heist even without modern arms. Use the geometry to jump up top, soar in, get the thermite on the vault and then winch it off the hinges. Simple and predominantly indoors, so it's a first time clear. Breaking Feds comes next, a heist which seems to throw all of us off from time to time. Sometimes I just like to answer the pager directly in front of the cameraman, alright? If I'm inconsistent at stealth in general, then breaking Feds is next level, because once again, after a set of boring slip-ups, I make it into Garrett's office, get the code right the second time around, and grab the keycard without making a single kill on a guard. From here it's easy to find the box and escape through the archives cleanly. Only 5 more heists to go to prove that Cagliostro wasn't that far behind the times when he wrote that manuscript. Next up, Henry's Rock, a notoriously difficult DSOD heist, but one that should suit my build quite well. The bunkers and airlocked rooms all force the Murkies into the bow's optimal range, making it fairly easy for me to secure box 1 from the main storage zone and number 2 in the archaeological wing of the compound. From here, it's just a case of pushing back out into the entrance, disabling the remote turret from the control panels, and securing the artifacts in the chopper, which is a pretty intense scramble I have to admit, running dry on first aid kits in the melee and just barely squeaking out. The tricky Shacklethorn auction is up next, which is a heist that sees you rapidly overran in a pretty tight space, so instead of playing into the weaknesses of the bow, I chose to stealth this one too. On attempt 1, I embarrassingly got caught tabbing out while waiting for a guard to move, which is another fairly unique cock-up to add to your bingo sheet. Run 2 ends in much the same way, this time when I shoot a guard in front of a camera. Third time's the charm, however, after I deal with the cameras, murder a poor auctioneer, and hack my way to the obsidian plate. A simple enough stealth heist with a bit of forethought. Bringing us on to Hell's Island. I go in with Revenant skills instead of body expertise, as I should have selected ages ago, but even so, this heist is made a lot more manageable with Stoic and FAKs. It's front loaded with difficulty, so once you've survived the ambush and made it into the prison proper, you're very much so out of the woods. This is easier said than done, but my usual hiding spot is effective in sufficiently confusing this minigun dozer and buying me time to get into the security zone. With Bane now free, we have to run the gauntlet to the rooftops before covering Lot's escape to the chopper. I learned from last time that the key here is to pick up kills in the area to move Locke along and prevent a time-based failure. This means that I have to be seriously active and aggressive during these sections, but the bow's consistent one-shot capability makes this quite doable. Whilst the final time scramble was a close one, I'd done enough earlier in the heist to gain access to the helipad with about 5 seconds to spare. It was now time to head back in time, maybe to a period where my weapons would be relevant once again for the No Mercy heist. With how cops tend to funnel on this heist, it's quite easy to take them out individually, while Stoic makes me virtually untouchable. I spent most of this heist basically using my arrows as melee weapons, sticking them into their intended targets before even firing a shot. Definitely not the way of a skilled marksman. We got lucky here by drilling open the door to the infected patient immediately and find a valid sample within 9 minutes of the heist, speeding things along quite nicely. Multiple dozers do present a pretty serious problem when they all come at once, but with enough arrows in them, everyone falls in the end. Thanks to the power of Stoic, I never have to deal with a broken test tube, and I'm able to escape virtually as soon as the elevator arrives. This is definitely one of my cleanest runs in the series, and is both testament to the ludicrous power of Stoic, and the surprising effectiveness of the bow in single player. Hell, thanks to the explosive bolts, I was even able to smash past 100% accuracy. Take that, logic. Which brings us on to Robin, or the fully armoured drunken warrior which he had become's final test, the White House, which I think just about outdoes King John's castle. I decided in my infinite wisdom to take on this heist in loud the first time around, which was promptly and ruthlessly punished on multiple occasions, once even by my old nemesis, the handcuffs. At which point I broke and decided it was only right to steal the documents that would liberate my band of merry thieves silently. One day I'll have a strong enough build from a challenge run to actually take this final heist on in loud, but today is most certainly not that day. Stealth is not without its own perils though. I fail multiple times at the busy Oval Office before finally sneaking through with just the one necessary kill. Once I'm in the P.O.C., all I need to do is lie low, survive this one scare with a particularly observant agent, and make it out with all 24 of the pardons. With one final victory lap towards the chopper, that was it. White House complete, medieval honour restored, and the greatest heist of all finally ticked off Yelwonkk's bucket list. So on our quest, not only have we secured the 3 heisting masks of old, we've emphatically made it through without using a single tool invented in the past several centuries. Please ignore all those helicopters we flew and cars we drove, they're just set dressing. Whilst this is a solid victory, it's not my proudest moment. I think Stoic is a little too strong and will try to avoid leaning on this deck in the future unless the run basically has no other options. I also didn't need to make use of the new phone a friend lifeline, which seemed like a shame, but let me know if you like the sound of it. Also, I'm hoping this finally appeases all the many commenters who have asked, what about using a bow on the no shooting run? Had I done it, yes, it would have been immediately possible and a lot easier too, which is why I didn't. I think it would have spoiled the essence of that run. In any case, this was an incredibly fun challenge to play through. I genuinely feel like I've improved with the Plains Rider, which is a fairly underrated weapon in my opinion. And even better, I've brought back some honour to the ingenuity of the Middle Ages. So we can say definitively, yes, you can indeed beat Payday 2 as Robin Hood, especially if you keep yourself loaded up with the good stuff almost the entire time.
I'm rescuing you from this green beast. Hey!
As ever, thank you very much to my mean infamy patrons and above. If you want to join that infamous club to see yourself in the credits or get early exclusive access to my videos, including the story videos, check out my Patreon link below. Remember the Discord is open to all if you crave some more Payday discussion. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you all very soon for the next one.